My name's Charlie McMenamin. I'm from the Bogside, born and bred Bogside, and people know me on Twitter as Bogside and Proud. So anything happens in the Bogside, people are sending me messages, what's happening, what's going on. They think I know everything, but
What was your family like growing up? How big was your family?
there was six of us, and we lost one. We grew up in a place called Herd Street, which is just down below the Fountain Estate there. Uh, um, when we were children, we used to go up Herd Street, go through the Fountain Estate to go to Abercorn Park, and there was never any problems. We were never told that there was a difference. Uh, and the people in religion and the people that were living in the fountain. And as I grew up, I just considered everybody that I knew, or everybody from the Protestant tradition as Christians, like myself.
When it came to the '60s, and tensions were building, and the Battle of the Bogside took place, what were your experiences in the changes that took place, and what are some of the experiences that really stand out?
My first experience the conflict was waking up. We lived in Herd Street. We lived on that street. We lived in number 10 Herd Street. And next door to us was a family called the Freels. Bob Freel, Billy Freel, Joe Freel, John Freel, Jean, Mary. All good friends as we grew up. You know, some of them were older than me and they're not like me saying it. But when we woke up one morning and outside our house was a big barricade built of furniture and part of an old lorry. Anything anybody could get, they blocked the street. That was piled outside our house. So my first experience of conflict was in. But I remember that morning, and I don't know how this happened, but we were out playing. And when we were out playing, we played below the Derry Walls, which is at a place called Nader's Row. And when we looked up on the walls, the police was there. I now know them as the B Specials, uh, or the Royal Ulster Constabulary, as some call them. So at some stage, while we were playing, stones came down from the walls, and the only people that we could see on the walls were the police. So we assumed that it was the police, so I ran home and told my mother. And you could feel tensions rising, because we lived right beside where the barricade was, and my mother was always going on about maybe someone might set that on fire. So I think it was either that night or the next night we were moved out. Uh, we were evacuated. Our furniture and stuff stayed in the house, but we were taken to a house. I don't know where it was, Craigan or Chantala, but I remember sleeping under the stairs. There was a row of us sleeping under the stairs in the house, and blankets on top of blankets. So we stayed there for a couple of days. My memory is staying there for a couple of days, and then we were moved to a house on Foy Road. It was a prefabricated building, and it belonged to the family called the Pattersons. That's all I remember about those couple of days. Uh, I think we stayed between my grandmother's, Pattersons, and a few other houses for about a week, and then things calmed down again, and we were allowed to go back to the house, and it was just as if things were normal again. But there was always ongoing sort of tensions in the street. We didn't realise, and then one day I decided to take my. I was a bit of a wanderer, I would have disappeared for maybe a couple of hours at a time from the street and ended up in the park or down along a river or whatever. One day I decided I was taking my young sister to Abercorn Park, and there we started off. We went up through uh, up Herd Street, up along Nader's Row, and proceeded across Bishop Street and into what I now know as a fountain. I didn't know what his name was, and it was just another street in the area. And as we walked through the street, some of the kids in the street started kicking at us, and that happens on a lot of streets you go into, but this was bad. And it was bad because while we just wanted to go to the park and play. While we were going to the park, the adults in the street stood and watched it happening as the other kids kicked at us and punched at us and stuff like that. It wasn't that. They were all kids my size, and you know, I hit back as much as they hit back. But I defended my sister. So we got through, but that was the first experience of anything sectarian, apart from the stones being thrown, you know, the week before. But that was my first. I never went through it again after. Years later maybe, but not then. And the funny thing is as the years went on, you know, I ended up working on the interface in that area and helping to protect our neighbours on the fountain side and protect the elderly on our own side. So that was my first experience, and then uh, during I don't know where this was 68 or 69, but I remember my grandma lived at in the Razzle Flats, and between the Razzle Flats and a footway was the Rocking Chair Bar. So that's where everybody gathered on a Saturday. When there was tensions with the police and when there was marches and stuff, everybody gathered at the end of the top of Font Street, Waterloo Street, and my grandma had a bird's eye view right up Butcher Street. So we could watch as the police and the rioters, there was tension there. But one of the first experience of ever seeing the viciousness of the P specials was I was watching at my grandma's window one day, and there was a lot of people standing about. But one of her neighbours was a bald-headed man. I couldn't tell you his name. I can't. I may have known it at the time, but I can't remember it now. But I remember this guy standing with what looked like a motorbike helmet on him with goggles, and he was up and down, and he had a shield with him. I wouldn't have knew what the purpose was of it then. I thought he was one of the riders.
Hang on a second. Excuse me. Let's get some water. Right, so you start with
I never knew what the intention of his shield and stuff was then, you know, but I always, because I thought at the beginning he was one of the riders, but he was walking up and down the back of the crowd, and then this man said something to him, and the next thing he battened him with a stick that he had and busted open his head, and the man rolled down. There was like a grassy verge behind where the man was. He rolled down that grassy verge towards the flats. And that just everything just exploded. Then you know everything went mad, and the rioting went on for days and days. And a few of those days I stayed with my grandparents. One particular night, my grandma and grandfather were Kathleen and Charlie Casey, and they were quiet sort of people. You know, only cared about their family, uh, and nothing else. You know, weren't involved in the rioting, although one of my uncles would have been out most nights during the rioting, Junior Casey. And he was, you know, he would have been, he was in the middle of it, the middle of the trouble, and always come back home dirty and full of tar, smelling of petrol, everything else. But
right. Go ahead.
do you want those? That might help.
What is it?
It's like a mint.
Oh, thanks. Sorry.
So one of the nights during the troubles, the balcony outside was full of people, just full of people, and every time the police made a run to try and catch people, the balcony filled up, and people were going in and out of people's houses. But my grandma was one of them people where she didn't want anything to do with it. She was afraid for her own family. This is talking there years later about it. She was afraid for her own family. I wouldn't let people in the door. So one of the nights where, believe it or not, she had the curtains closed and we couldn't see anything that was happening. And I was just itching to go out the kitchen and watch, but she wouldn't let me. So she got a knock at the door, and someone said, "Look, the police on the walls are throwing stones down from the walls and smashing people's windows. So be careful, stay away from the windows and stuff." And my grandma came back in again. Nobody was allowed to answer the door except her, because I think if she had let my grandfather out, he'd have been out riding along with him as well. But she answered the door, and someone told her what was happening. They were smashing windows. And she came in and she said, "They're running around telling people the police are smashing windows. The police wouldn't do things like that." So we were sitting about 10 minutes later, and all the windows came in on top of us. They threw the stones down from the walls and smashed the windows. Lucky enough, the curtains were closed, and that saved anybody from getting injured. But as soon as that happened, my grandfather, he just jumped up. He said, "Right, that's it. Now I'm going out there and get stuck on these," and all the names he used. He wanted to go out and get involved in it, but she wasn't having it. Uh, so that was my another experience of 68, 69. And this went on, for months. And those couple of years, I'd been on and out of my grandma's. And at days, even when I was out playing, when riding started, I'd went down to sit on a wall at Kale's Walk there and watch what was going on as well. If I was caught, I was taken home. But as far as they were concerned, I was out the front playing. I wasn't involved in anything. And I was too young anyway. At that stage, I was 8 or 9 years of age. And one of the names that stood out for me then was they always talked about the butcher boy, and that McGinnis boy, and my granny was always on about he's up causing trouble. So I talked to Martin McGinnis about it years later, and Martin said, "That would have been me." He said, "I've been up in the middle of trouble." He said, "In the middle of riding." He said everything else. He said, "So she was probably she must have knew the connection or knew the family." At that stage, I didn't know that my grandfather had been involved too in the war independence. Wasn't talked about in our house. Politics. We weren't. There was no difference made about people's religion in our house either. So as I grew up, it wasn't about religion. It was about what the police were doing in our community, and it was about what the British Army were doing when they came in then. But the funny thing about the British Army is when they came in, and I think it was 1969, the British Army came in. One of the first things my grandmother done when they set up barricade at Butcher Street there was to make tea and sandwiches and send it up them. Everybody done it apparently that lived on the verges at the time. They seen the British Army as the protectors then at that stage. They were in to protect us. Although some more seasoned people would have said, "Don't trust the British Army." I remember my grandfather saying, you know, "Callahan, you shouldn't be sending them people up tea and sandwiches." And I remember my granny saying, "Well, my sons are living in England." She said, "I would like people in England to treat my sons the same way as I'm treating these young men that come here." She said, "As long as they don't do harm." My grandfather said, "Well, my grandfather had been in the British Army in the 40s. He said, "Well, they're trained soldiers." He said, "They might they might turn on us at some stage." My granny said, "Well, I'll make my mind up when that happens." So the person that was sent up with tea and sandwiches a lot of the time was me. And to be honest, at that stage, the British soldiers were quite friendly. But our family, we moved into from Herds, out of Herd Street. I forgot to say earlier that when we were in Herd Street, when we before we moved back, our windows and stuff were smashed in our house. Our houses weren't wrecked, but the house wasn't broken into, but our windows and stuff were smashed. And I don't know what happened with the barricade outside where it had been set on fire or anything, but when we went back to the house, our house looked normal enough. but the windows had been fixed and stuff. I remember him talking about that. I remember my mother saying she wanted the windows fixed before we moved back in again. But she always felt uneasy about living there after that. And at one stage, then we moved from there to a brand new house in Chantallo. And while we were in Chantallo, I think Cusick and Beatty were shot dead in the bogside. And at that stage, then I decided that I would never again take tea or sandwiches to the British soldiers from my grandmother. But I think at that stage, my grandfather or my grandmother realised that that wasn't the right thing to do. They weren't to be made welcome anymore, and she never ever suggested taking tea or sandwiches to the soldiers after that.
How about any memories? This would just be a few years later, but by the time Bloody Sunday happened, do you have memories of Bloody Sunday or your family?
Bloody Sunday, but we moved up to place called. We moved then from Chantal. The family couldn't settle in Chantal; it was too far away for our family members. So we moved up to a place called Rathkeil Way. And while we were in Rathkeil Way, there was a young guy died across the street from a gunshot wound. A young guy called Diamond. I remember getting on the house. I remember Ranger Best being shot dead too. He was a neighbour of ours. I remember getting on the house to look at the remains and stuff like that. It was a sad time for everybody because no matter what, he was a young man from our street and he died. We'd never really experienced death. My grandmother died a few years before. That was my first experience of death. But I remember Ranger Best dying on that street as well. And the day Bloody Sunday happened, as the march went down the street, down Rathlin Drive, I went to the end of the street. But before I went to the end of the street, my mother told me not to go on the march. And she warned me. She said, "You will not be out that door." She said, "For months." She said, if you go to that march today." I was one of those people that was a wanderer. I could have went on the march, but there's something that day about it that told me not to go. So I followed it from the top of Rathan Drive right down to the top of Southway. And my memory of Bloody Sunday was people singing. Uh, there was a Silver Light song. What was the name? We shall overcome. And those words always make hair stand on the back of my neck when I think about that day that people went down. So after, when the march went down, we watched the whole lot go down. There was a lot of people there and a lot of singing. People seemed jovial enough and happy enough. There was no sign of any tensions at that stage. Um, but about an hour and a half later, some of our neighbours, I remember one of the Sheehan girls coming up Southway and she was crying. I remember saying to her, "What's wrong?" She said, "There's people shot, people shot." And I said, "Who?" And she said, I don't know who they are. She said, "But there's people dead." And at that stage, to me, that was traumatic. Uh, uh, and as that happened, I went home and told my mother. And my mother said, "Well, I'm glad you didn't go today, son." And we were getting news in, and then the news came through that we were cousins with people called Mahans. That their cousin, who lived over the street from us, was also shot, Shasab Mahan. It turned out that he was injured, badly injured, but he didn't die. But that's everybody started coming to the street and going up to their house. There wasn't a lot of cars and stuff about then. People hadn't got cars. That many people had cars. But I remember my uncle Jim Mahan coming over along with my aunt Patsy. They see the Mahans as well. They're quiet. Mahans are a quiet family. Their mother died not that long ago, but that was one of the things about Bloody Sunday that stood out for me. And then for several days, then we didn't go near the flats where my grandma lived. We stayed away. My mother must have been nervous about it, kept us away, and we didn't get near. But uh, I remember going to with my father to the bloody Sunday funeral. It poured down my rain that day, and to be honest, apart from all the coffins coming out of chapel, it didn't really hit me how serious things were. So that's what I remember about Bloody Sunday. I remember the funeral. I remember Shazza Mahan being shot coming from our street. I remember Ranger Best around that. I think it might have been after it. I'm not sure about the dates and stuff. Uh, but Bloody Sunday had a big impact on me. And then as I got older, when people talked about it and they talked about the losses, and uh, you never really thought about 13 people being shot dead in your streets. And then uh, we moved around a lot. We moved then to back to the Bogside. We were in Garden Square. I remember Motorman. That morning, the Brits came in, they raided all of the houses, including ours. And this went on for several days. There was gun battles, there was shootings. Now, it was most of the British Army was doing the shooting. Uh, and just before we had moved to Garden Square, a young guy called Hargan had been run over and killed on Western Street by the British Army. Damien Hargan. Their his parents were just below where we lived in Garden Square. We grew up. His family. So those are the sort of incidents in them years that I remember. And those are the sort of things that formulated how I thought for the rest of my life. I always knew that anybody in uniform, with a gun, couldn't be trusted. Uh, but at the same time, I also know that from a community perspective, people have to negotiate on behalf of their community with these people. And I've seen that happening as we grew up as well. Paddy Bogside, Sean Keenan, when people get negotiated with the British Army and RUC at the worst of times on behalf of the community, and that's appreciated. Uh, Paddy Bogside's house when we lived in Garden Square was just across the road, and it was a hive of activity. There was a lot of coming and going there. Anything our family needed, they went to Paddy Bogside. The Doherty family were great people. Eileen and Paddy were brilliant people, great family. I always wanted to help. And I know that in my life, they helped my mother a lot and my father.
Why do you think it's important for people to remember what people did? Not just you were young, but the people who were more active and played a role in the Troubles. Why do you think it's important? If you start the answer with, I think it's important that.
Hmm. Well, I think it's important to remember, but it's also important to remember what was done on our community and how it was dealt with and how it was sometimes fixed. Uh, when you're coming out of conflict, which I've seen here, like I am 58 years of age now, and there's been conflict here from I was 8 years of age. And the conflict before me, before I came, was there from the 1920s, the partition of Ireland. And the civil rights movement just got their head above the water here at that time, 68, 69. It was a right period because it was happening across the world. There were civil rights movements in nearly every country, particularly America, and there was, I learned afterwards, there were civil rights campaigns going on in Paris and the Sorbonne. We young people demanding civil rights. There's actually campaigns going on now in Paris for civil rights for people as well. So it's important to learn from conflict, but the thing about conflict is not to repeat all the mistakes that were made in the past. The governments that are involved in conflict, if they don't learn from the past, then there'll be no future. And I think through people's pain, if they can talk about conflict, talk about what they went through, and they're allowed to speak about it, and they're allowed to say exactly how they felt at the time, then hopefully those mistakes that were made in the past by governments won't be made in the future. Uh, I was too young when the trouble started here, and it did affect my life. You know, as I grew older, I ended up in prison myself. Uh, I went to prison for 3 years for offences that I didn't commit. It was the RUC tortured me in Strand Road, and that's why I ended up in prison. And people at that time didn't believe that those sort of things were happening. You know, just as when I was a child, I wouldn't have guessed that there was bad police or bad soldiers or people in power, abused power, which we have all found out they have in recent years. And I think if we can learn from the past, then we can build a better future. And the future for my child, uh, I have tried to create in a way, but not only for my child, for all the children around us living in these areas, living in this community. I want them they live in peacetime. I want them they live in an Ireland that's united, where the people are united. Doesn't matter about uniting Ireland and all that there. It's important to me that people are united. The people that have their feet on the ground, the ordinary people, the governments have to support us and help us, and no matter what our needs are. By the looks of it, everything's going to be privatized in the future. That's something I don't want. That would be something that would maybe bring another civil rights movement out onto the streets, where people lose their lives, and it'll be ordinary people like ourselves that will lose their lives because of the rich and capitalists out there that are trying to make money on the backs of war and everything else.